On my 18th birthday, which was May 15th, 93, I had gone to the park with a group of my friends to barbecue and play frisbee and stuff. I was sitting in the grass with a couple friends, and there was a buddy of mine that was behind me, and he was doing a backflip and didn't see me and landed on top of me and broke my neck at the 5th cervical vertebrae. So I, fell back into the grass and realized instantly that I was paralyzed because I couldn't feel anything below my neck and I couldn't move anything. And I knew that paralysis was a permanent injury, that you get paralyzed and then you are paralyzed for the rest of your life. But as soon as I had that conscious realization, I was given a really clear image of myself running around and tossing the frisbee around, which was really comforting. I had a really strong belief that this was not going to be a permanent injury, that I was going to be fine.
It was a while before, we heard an actual diagnosis, but before the diagnosis, I knew that he was paralyzed.
Who's got the wheels? Hang in there. We're at the hospital.
Tim broke the 5th bone of his neck. When he had the fracture, there was damage to the ligaments, and there was movement of the bone backwards in the direction of the spinal cord.
How you doing?
You can see that this back edge of the bone doesn't line up with the other bones, and it's moved back into the space that would normally be occupied by the spinal cord and is pressing on it. Later that day, he had an MRI scan which showed hemorrhage in his spinal cord. And after seeing the hemorrhage in the spinal cord, I was even more discouraged about any potential for recovery, and related to his parents that I thought the odds of him getting better were probably about 1 in 10,000.
The damage to the spinal cord was severe enough that, all the doctors that looked at it, figured that I wouldn't move anything ever again.
During that evening in the emergency room, I literally screamed into heaven internally, asking God to give me a word. I just literally screamed into heaven, and I heard words back from heaven. Now, I didn't hear an audible voice, so I can't explain how I knew, but I just knew that was God speaking to me. And I felt like what he was saying to me was, I've stopped him in his tracks, but I'll restore him fully.
I can remember saying, Lord, I need a word. And I just tend to be very, very visual. And I had a vision. And it was a vivid, 3D, full-colored vision. It was like I turned my head, and standing next to me was Christ. And he turned and looked me in the eye, and he said, "To the eyes of man, it appears as death. But when the bandages are removed, there will be neither stench nor decay, but only fullness of life." And
it was during that night that we, as we were praying, basically gave God permission to take Tim home with him.
this tattered journal is what Susan and I wrote in day by day to keep a record of our spiritual and emotional experiences as we walked through Tim's accident. Thursday, May 20th, Isaiah 40. But those who wait for the Lord, who expect, look for, and hope in him, shall change and renew their strength and power. They shall lift up their wings and mount up close to God as eagles mount up to the sun. They shall run and not be weary.
Weary and walk and not grow faint. And, that was a verse that was given to my parents by a lot of different sources and was given to my parents from God.
On Friday the 21st, X-ray results come in indicating that Tim has a collapsed lower right lobe. That's why he's been working so hard to breathe. The consequences, or the prize, is a bronchiostomy, which is a tube down the throat into the lungs, hopefully inflating them when that's done so that there'll be a quick recuperation.
For me, the real low point hit on Friday the 21st. I felt like I had been asking, or I had been really trying to trust the Lord for this healing, and I hadn't seen very much happen yet. And eventually, by late afternoon, his lung collapsed. And I was really, really mad at God at that point. And I guess, again, his love is just so wonderful. Because despite the fact that I was mad, he was still on the process of working a miracle.
The social workers and the psychologists were saying that my parents were only hurting me by telling me that I was going to be okay and that I was going to walk away from this.
I cried and cried and cried and really fell apart. I felt like in the middle of that, God had to say a hard thing to me. And that was, you don't know how much you can take, and you don't know how much Tim can take before this is all worked out.
I wouldn't say that he took away all the suffering, but he comforted me through the suffering that was there.
I had been taking care of Tim on and off, and I think he'd probably been in the hospital about a week or so.
He was beginning to have some trouble breathing because with his paralysis, he wasn't able to use his chest wall to breathe. And we were beginning to consider whether he needed to be on a breathing machine or not.
And he was in a corner bed in the neuro ICU, and he liked to keep the curtains closed around him. And I was sitting at the nurse's station charting, and I looked over, and all I could see was his feet, and I saw his toes twiddling.
I sort of remembered, I was like, oh, by the way, look what I got this morning. And I moved my legs for her, and she was pretty shocked, I think.
I got a call from the intensive care unit to say that Tim had started moving his legs, and I told him, yeah, tell me another one. This kid's never going to get better. And I really was convinced that it was just a muscle spasm. But later that evening when I saw him, he really was able to move his legs. He could lift his heels up off the bed. He could bring his knees together and spread them apart. And I was just stunned.
Friday the 28th of May, 13 days since the accident. All the nurses, especially Crystal and Karen, the OT, Shelley, the PT, Chris, were crying when we came in. Tim moved his legs. We cried. We embraced. Thank you, Lord.
One of the remarkable things about this story is the degree to which prayer went up for Tim across the whole body of Christ. We received word from Catholic people, from Lutherans, from Baptists, from Presbyterians, not only in Spokane, but across the nation.
There was a tremendous amount of praying going on. I was praying, almost constantly. And it was just sort of it was just sort of the routine, I would be trying to stand and my legs would be spasming and I'd say a little prayer and they'd stop, and it was just sort of how I made it through every little step of the day that I had to go through.
When I prayed at night, I didn't, because I was 9 years old, I didn't really know the medical terms, but I pretty much just said, Dear Lord, thank you for this day, thank you for your love, thank you for my brother, and thank you for what you've done so far. I just pray that you'll, keep him healthy and keep him alive and keep him going.
This is the entry from Wednesday, June 9th, the day of Tim's graduation from Meade High School. This afternoon at 3 o'clock, Julie Humphreys, a reporter from News 6, will be doing an interview, and then they'll take shots at graduation.
Last night, he spoke at his high school graduation, and he brought down the house.
I was able at that point to wheel myself out onto the stage under my own power.
sitting there at graduation watching Tim go across the stage, do his speech, and get his diploma. Everyone was so proud of him, and it was amazing. It wasn't supposed to happen, and it was a miracle from God, and it just reminded you of everything, we were blessed.
My relationship with God changed a lot because he just showed me. I mean, he showed me what he can do.
What this story needs to be saying to people is that the God who performed the miracle is the same God who sustained me through the darkness. Whether or not we experience this tangible victory at the end, that doesn't change God's character. He is a God of love, a God of healing, a God of mercy, and a God of comfort.
I have no explanation for why God healed Tim. There isn't anything special about us. We're not particularly spiritual. There are other people who undergo accidents and they aren't healed. The only explanation I can give is just that God was merciful to us in touching our son and healing him.
I don't know why I was the one in 10,000.
The final entry in our journal says, on Friday, July 9th, despite hospital regulations, Tim walked out of Sacred Heart Hospital. And so continues the remarkable story of Timothy, whose name means honoring God.
Well, then this is a story about a guy who broke his neck and was told by the doctors that he would never move again, and was told by the Lord that he would. And he did. And his life has never been the same.